Massive news all week for Palantir, where the stock also seems to be liking the barrage of updates as well. So let's just take a look at the stock price action first. Off the full first week after the announcement from S&P Inclusion, seems we've gotten a lot of excitement already with the stock, closing out the week up several percentage points in the $35 range. Now, with their current share float and price per share, this does put them close to an $80 billion market cap. Now, everyone's got their own 2 cents on what that means to them, so we'll continue to see if this can be sustained or run even higher or start to see some profit taking. But definitely a lot of positive sentiment right now at the current moment. Now, first, I didn't think this week could close off on a higher note, but looks like we get a surprise again. Newly posted on defense.gov for the contracts awarded September 13th, Palantir's name shows up being awarded a $100 million firm fixed price contract for research and development for user-centered machine learning. Now, it's important to note this is not necessarily the biggest contract with an estimated completion date of September 12th, 2029. So that's average, say, over 5 years. That's $20 million a year, which is still not something to sneeze at, even if it's only $5 million a quarter on average. But this continues to show Palantir is in the running for these contracts that add up, and don't forget the goodwill that this continues to build up between the DoD and Palantir. This is focused on user-centered machine learning, so the next generation of work that the government is continually trying to integrate throughout the branches, so definitely a pleasant surprise to close off the week. Now, we open up the week with a big press release from Palantir noting that they will be extending their relationship with BP, or British Petroleum, another 5 years. This is after working together already for a decade, well before AIP, utilizing Foundry and building up their ontology. And they were one of the early adopters who before Palantir DPO'd, had an ownership stake too as part of their work together. So although it remains unclear of that stake still being held today, I think this announcement specifically notes that they will be expanding their usage of Palantir AIP across their company and shows that with the biggest enterprises in the world and one of the most important, I'd say, when it comes to energy, that Palantir is able to deliver on so much value to them that they are signing up again and doing another 5-year commitment. And that's to close out the rest of the 2020s. So it'll be exciting to see more news come out of this partnership. Then we get a few notable analyst comments on Palantir, especially after the S&P Inclusion announcement. First, we have Dan Ives, who no doubt enjoyed the announcement around their S&P Inclusion. He has his $38 price target, which actually seems to be in sight for the near term at least, and his remarks that S&P Inclusion is another validation moment for the company, as well as the stock, and believes it starts a new era of enterprise growth for the company. He thinks still that this will be the start of a multi-year cycle of significant deal flow through AIP, and that more organizations looking to implement AI will be considering and signing up with Palantir. And even if he expects this mostly to be driven by the commercial business, he's also still optimistic on the government side too. Then we got Mariana from Bank of America, who dropped a bombshell price target of $50. Now, I have the dedicated video here that walks through the full report. It goes into quite a bit of detail, so check that out for more information. But essentially, the TLDR is that S&P Inclusion First is a massive moment for the company, but also it's going to make other institutions take a deeper look at Palantir as an investment, even if it doesn't guarantee them to be buying it up. It does, though, increase the probability of those taking a chance because they've reached such a significant milestone that seems to signal there is something deeper to understand about the company past any surface level look at, say, their metrics. But also, she compared how we are underestimating artificial intelligence today to how cell phone ubiquity was totally underestimated in the 1980s, by over 100 times actually, where she brings up a study for AT&T. They had a consultant state around 900,000 users by the 2000s, but actually it turned out to be over 100 million users then. So she thinks this can be a similar situation for Palantir and AI, and still she remains bullish on the government and commercial business of Palantir and notes how their go-to-market strategy seems to be catching on and working because revenue and customer numbers are going up. And she also provides her outlooks into the 2026s to explain why she put that jumbo $50 price target on the company, so we'll see if she ends up right. Now, for Citibank, I didn't actually cover this in a daily video, but they released their comments on S&P Inclusion, and it seems their sentiment is staying the same, cautiously optimistic, noting the expensiveness of the name right now. So they also reaffirmed their neutral rating Thursday and still holding onto that $30 price target, and they noted how the government business has recently bolstered the deal closing in the previous quarter, but uncertainty around that going forward is still in the back of their minds. But they also did note their recent hiring of Mike Gallagher, former congressman, is a positive for the long term, but regardless, they're still an expensive stock to them by traditional metrics. And they also are still cautious on the growth and monetization of AIP, since it still seems to be in the early stages from their perspective. So they're still doing the wait and see approach, keeping them from going full bullish on the stock, but do recognize the significance of S&P inclusion and basically think they're expensive. Now, word of caution as always, these are analysts' opinions and perspectives. Nothing is guaranteed, but it is interesting to see how some of these evolve over time, especially with Mariana's massive $50 price target. And you can agree or disagree with these all you want. Everyone's personal stance on what is expensive, risky, is going to be derived from a valuation that you believe is under, over, fairly valued with their expected growth. And obviously, someone is buying and selling shares on both sides of the transaction. So that $80 billion market cap we're seeing means something to someone. So at least from my personal perspective, not investing advice, of course, there's a lot of execution and performance priced into the stock today. But even so, this will greatly differ from your own personal risk appetite, holding period, percentage of holding within your whole portfolio, stage of life, expectations of the company too, and even the qualitative aspects that we can't necessarily measure with easy numbers. And there's so much more to look at. So do as you'd like with this information. Now, to break up the seriousness, we actually get a funny clip this week from Jim Cramer. He really just had nothing to say, just calling them a cold stock, which if you've been following, he jumps around from saying they're just a bunch of press releases like a fake company, all the way to loving these guys, to inviting Karp to talk with him on the show. And now he's got nothing to say even after S&P inclusion, which is interesting. I take everything he says with a grain of salt, of course, and do not follow Mad Money personally, but I think it's just quite entertaining to see. Maybe it's just a way to drive engagement and viewers for the show, I don't know. Then we've got ARK Invest selling off some Palantir shares this week. It's been pretty quiet as of recent, and I don't care what she does with her portfolios, but a lot of people are still curious to at least know what is she doing with her funds, so do as you'd like with this information. Now, let's also take a look at the SEC filings at some insider selling, and we don't actually get any crazy sells in my opinion at least, but first, like clockwork, Palantir continues to offload their Rubicon holdings. Basically, it's worth zero in the grand scheme of things to me, but I'm still looking out for when they decide to jump ship and dump way more to signal that a clear exit from this stake. Now for the insider sells, looking at Heather Planishek, she exercised options and immediately sold in the $33 range. Then we got Lauren Stat's spouse, David Stat, offloading only 6,000 shares around $33. Then with David Glazer, who received 149,000 shares at a zero cost basis, with Ryan Taylor getting the same amount awarded too. But then he turned around and sold off 160,000 shares, but that's with the exercise options. As well as Alex Karp with a smaller sale in proportion to his holdings, around 246,000 shares. So that's the extent of the insider selling this week, but we'll continue to look out for more significant jumps and from other executives. Now, the juicy stuff that I personally believe took all the attention and coverage, well, S&P inclusion, the announcement at least just happened last week, so Palantir's leadership had a bunch to say on the topic. Alex Karp released his videos. We had Mike Gallagher's tweets as well as Ted Mabry's that I specifically covered in the daily videos. And the general theme, at least from the Palantir insiders, is that this is a significant milestone for the company and was an internal goal. Obviously, it's not the end-all be-all, but it's a byproduct of all the great work that they've done and will continue to do. With also noting how a defense company has not joined the S&P 500 in more than 40 years, so it kind of turned to a small call to action too that there's still opportunity to serve the United States military and still run a viable business. And nonetheless, even if it's still symbolic to some, there are real outcomes due to their coming inclusion, like an extra selling point, trustworthiness, and I'd say most importantly is the risk of partnering up with them goes down as it shows more confidence in the financial sustainability of Palantir's business. So we'll see if this actually moves the dial. Then AIP Con 5. Palantir announced it on Wednesday after hours that it was going to take place the next day right on Thursday, so that quick turnaround time. So even if they teased it a little earlier in the week, it wasn't officially known to the broader public until that day before. Now, media-wise, it was a big week with Alex Karp's interview with CNBC right before the live stream started, and he started about his thoughts on S&P inclusion, the election, the work that Palantir is doing and will continue to do, and why they're successful today. And I think what caught everyone's attention is that Karp said he thinks they can be 10 times bigger. Now, a lot of people like to think that means stock price or market cap, but you know, it can really be open to interpretation like number of clients, number of users, profitability, revenue, cash pile, all those things. But regardless, 10 times bigger is a good thing. Then AIP Con also being able to bring up recent S&P inclusion in his opening intro, as well as being a big discussion point with Amit and company for the pregame show. Now, I have a full video regarding these summarizing the whole 2-hour AIP Con 5 event, so check those out when you have a chance for details. But the TLDR is that Palantir is continuing to double down on their builders and developers and interacting with the community while taking in feedback to continually improve the product. and their robust product ecosystem is serving the multiple needs of their customers, and that the trend is that they're continuing to expand their usage of Palantir beyond the early use cases. And they're also proving that customers are finding real value with transforming their organizations around using Palantir, from empowering end users who are using boots on the ground with the actual tactical problems, working with decades-old legacy systems, to even driving real results and saving tens of millions of dollars, saving tons of time, few months of development, saving millions, to even just boosting FTE productivity and then being able to redeploy that more efficiently. So check out the full live stream for the keynote speakers you're interested in, or my summary video for the 15-minute lowdown, but just to warn you, that's just my perspective. So a major week for Palantir, done in the books with so many things happening, but what are your thoughts so below? And I'll see you in the next video.